For my thoughts on all the latest happenings in the NFL in a completely relaxed, unscripted format, be sure to check out my channel, JG9 News. And now, on with our feature presentation. For many people, the NFL Draft is a lifelong dream that is the realization of all their hard work, their dedication, and their sacrifices over the years. After years of playing this sport and hoping to make it into the pros someday to get paid to play this game at the highest level, you hear your name called, you hear that a team has taken a chance on you, and most of the time, you're absolutely thrilled. Maybe you're not going to the destination that you want, or maybe you're not going in the route that you thought, but at the very least, you are going pro. Everybody wants to hear their name called, and when they do, it's a sweet relief. In other words, it's the exact opposite of a military draft, where you are hoping that your name does not get called, so you do not have to uproot your life to fight in a foreign country under not-so-great conditions, risk your life, and potentially come back with PTSD and things that will scar you for life. Hearing your name called at the age of 21 to go into the NFL, and hearing your name called at the age of 21 to go into service are at completely opposite ends of the spectrum in terms of drafts, their purpose, and their enjoyment factor. Well, I bring that up because this man that you've been watching this whole time is Florida State quarterback Jimmy Jordan. And I don't think he quite got the memo. Because, yeah, he went there. He actually went there. At the 1980 NFL Draft, Jordan got drafted by the New England Patriots and was given an opportunity to play football at the next level, even despite his flaws in college, which we'll get to in a bit. And he immediately blew it. I'm talking about speed running your way out of the NFL and leaving a bad taste in people's mouths right away. Because let's just say that he did not want to get drafted by the Patriots for some reason, and he made an absolutely asinine comparison that more than 4 decades later, we have to talk about and dissect. Because this is the story behind Jimmy Jordan and the absolutely bizarre controversy at the 1980 NFL Draft where a player compared getting drafted by the Patriots to actually getting drafted. Seriously. Before I talk about the actual comment in question that left everyone scratching their head and wondering just who the heck the Patriots drafted in the first place, we need some context to understand who the player in question was, how good he was, and what kind of a quarterback people thought he had a shot at being at the next level. If you were a college football fan back in the late 1970s and going into the 1980 NFL Draft, then you definitely knew who this man was. This is Jimmy Jordan, and he was the starting quarterback of the Florida State Seminoles. During the 1979 season, Florida State had what was arguably their greatest season in program history at the time. They entered bowl season with an undefeated record for the first time in program history, and even though they ended up losing the Orange Bowl to Oklahoma, they ended the season ranked number 6 in the AP poll, which was their highest finish ever at the time. The fact that FSU, a program that just a few short years before was 0-11 and 1-10 in back-to-back seasons, was one win away from being the national champions, was remarkable. And a big reason why that was the case was the play of Jimmy Jordan at quarterback, as he helped guide FSU to a top 20 offense in the country that season. Now, there were some flaws with Jordan that we're going to get to in just a bit, but Jordan absolutely had his moments. In 1978, his 14 passing touchdowns ranked inside the top 10 of the entire NCAA, and he followed that up with a similarly impressive 13 touchdowns in 1979. His play off the bench, throwing 4 touchdowns in a game against Navy, and his 3-touchdown outing on television against LSU were big reasons why the Seminoles remained undefeated going into bowl season. He was talked about like a Heisman finalist at times. He was solid, and he had an absolute cannon of an arm, as he was routinely taking deep shots down the field and completing said passes to guys like Jackie Flowers and Hardis Johnson. It was weird watching Jordan play, because his repertoire was either passes at the line of scrimmage or these 30 and 40-yard bombs, and there was no in between, and it seemed to work pretty well for FSU. Jordan was the guy that would complete 40% of his passes, and would only go 9 for 23 in a game or something like that, but those 9 passes would be for 200 yards. He was one of those quarterbacks, and he did his job relatively well as the man under center for the Seminoles. However, there were a few things stopping him from being a highly touted prospect, despite leading FSU to the Orange Bowl. Number one, he was highly outspoken and was not afraid to tell it like it is, which you'll probably figure out when you realize the comments he made. There were some critiques about his leadership abilities, and at one point, while playing, he put his school and his coach, Bobby Bowden, on blast, because Jordan was not the full-time starting quarterback. Instead, it was a rotational system, where Bowden would just ride the hot hand and play whoever he felt like playing. Said Jordan on this, "If someone had a choice between attending a college with a one-quarterback system or a two-quarterback system, I would advise him to go to a one-quarterback system." He also had a really poor outing at the Orange Bowl, getting yanked midway through that game. One scouting report said on Jordan, "Dr. Longbaum didn't operate very well last year, showing poor judgment and questionable leadership qualities. Combine that with a poor Senior Bowl showing, and he had about the worst start to the calendar year of 1980 that you could ask for from a draft stock standpoint." On top of that, the numbers didn't add up like they did with other quarterbacks. Yes, the numbers looked significantly worse because Jordan had a tendency to throw deep passes, but he ended that 1979 season with a completion percentage of 48.3% and with 14 interceptions on 13 touchdowns, meaning that he threw more picks than touchdowns while completing less than 50% of his passes. Stats are not the end-all be-all, but when a quarterback is putting up those kinds of numbers and looks inaccurate to some degree, completing less than 1 out of every 2 passes, that's going to scare some teams away. From everything I could find, Jordan was projected as one of the middle quarterbacks in the class, in what was a very weak class on paper. Jordan wasn't in that tier 1 of guys like Mark Wilson and Mark Malone, but he was in that second tier, or at worst, the third tier of guys. Here's one scouting report from the Buffalo News that had Jordan as the 5th best quarterback in the class, only behind those 2 aforementioned guys, Paul McDonald and Gene Bradley. And that scouting report and ranking was fairly typical. All the scouting reports that I could find had him somewhere in that 5 to 8 range, and it seemed like he would go no later than the 4th or the 5th round. But no one, and I mean no one, could have seen just how far Jordan would slide in the draft. It was one of the most surprising draft slides in ages for those who were paying attention, because instead of being a potential top 5 quarterback off the board, he was not even a top 15 quarterback. There were literally 15 quarterbacks taken ahead of Jimmy Jordan, including guys like Dan Hartwig of California Lutheran, Mike Wright of Vanderbilt, and the man he destroyed in their head-to-head meeting on television during that 1979 season, LSU quarterback David Woodley. We were in the middle of the 12th round, and Jordan still had not heard his name called. Finally, with pick number 320, the New England Patriots put a stop to this and decided to take the FSU quarterback. Jordan had a significant uphill climb to make it onto the roster. No team carries 4 quarterbacks on their roster, and it seems like the Patriots had 3 guys comfortably going to make the team, as they had Steve Grogan, their starting quarterback, who in 1979 threw more touchdowns than any player in the NFL. They had Matt Cavanaugh, their second-round pick from 1978, who they were still really high on, even if he wasn't starting yet because Grogan was playing lights out. And they had Tom Owen, the veteran quarterback who was the primary backup to Grogan in 1979, and even led the team on a game-winning fourth-quarter touchdown drive against the Detroit Lions. This pick was a complete shot in the dark for the Pats. They figured that Jordan had slid so far, and worst-case scenario, they burn a 12th-round pick at a time where 12th rounders didn't make the roster. As of the 28 players taken in the 12th round that year, 20 of them didn't play a single snap in the NFL, and only 7 of them played more than 1 game. If it works out, great, but if not, no harm done. But the risk was worth the reward. The good news for Jordan was that his dream of being an NFL player was finally realized. He heard his name called and was going to be playing in the NFL. The bad news, obviously, was that it was with pick number 320. He thought he was going to be a way earlier draft pick, and he was taken at the tail end of the draft. He thought he was, at minimum, going to be guaranteed a roster spot, and now he was going to have an uphill climb to play professional football. He was prepping for the worst-case scenario based on the situation at FSU, saying, you hear good stuff and you hear bad stuff, but they don't ever tell you anything right out. You really don't know what's happening. The situation here at FSU didn't help much. The scouts let you know that it hurt. It's in all the scouting reports. Played only half the time. They want to know if I can do it all the time. But not even he could prepare himself for being a 12th round pick and losing out on a fair amount of money and potential job security. However, he was now in the NFL. What's done is done. He was finally drafted, and he was going to be playing on the New England Patriots. So how do you think he responded to the Patriots drafting him and making him a part of their family? You might think he'd say something like, it's disappointing that I slid that far, but I'm excited to finally be in the NFL and to prove everyone who passed on me wrong. You might think he'd say something like, I'm excited to be going to New England and working under a great coach and some great quarterbacks, and I'm ready to compete. You might think he'd say something like, plenty of players were drafted super late and later than expected, and they turned out fine, and I see no reason why I can't be any different. All of these are acceptable, perfectly normal, and somewhat generic, but absolutely fine answers that 4 decades later, we would not be dissecting. But Jimmy Jordan, as you might have been able to guess, did not say that. He did not say anything remotely close to that. Because upon getting drafted by the Patriots, he said, I kid you not, I guess it could be worse. I could have been drafted to go to Iran. Seriously. I guess it could be worse. I could have been drafted to go to Iran. Okay, there are obviously a few problems with this statement. Number one, not that this is even remotely close to the biggest issue here, but the USA did not hold a draft for Iran. The last time the USA held a draft was for the Vietnam War, and the last time any man got drafted was in 1973. No one in the United States got drafted to go to Iran. Yes, the USA had people in Iran as part of the Iranian hostage crisis, and even tried to rescue the hostages as part of Operation Eagle Claw at the same time as the NFL draft, in what was a disastrous mission, but no one was drafted to go there. If you were not currently serving at the time, you were not taken from your home to go overseas and try and rescue the hostages. So let's just get that out of the way. Not that this is the biggest issue in the grand scheme of things with a statement like this. Because clearly, the biggest issue is, why the heck would you say something like this? Obviously, you're disappointed that you got drafted so late and went to the Patriots. Trust me, I get it. I get that this probably didn't go the way you thought it was going to go. And trust me, a lot of scouts and draft experts were just as surprised as you. But to compare getting drafted and having to go to Boston, to getting drafted for military service and potentially risking your life, to compare playing football for the Patriots to getting drafted in the military, that's such an insane comparison out of left field that I don't even know where you got it. I'm not sure whether your name is Jimmy Jordan or Debbie Downer, but obviously, this is so insensitive and so not even remotely the same thing that it's baffling that you came to that conclusion. The Patriots are the one team that actually are giving you a chance to show off what you can do in the NFL. And here you are saying, well, it's not Iran. Especially because when you get drafted in the 12th round, beggars can't be choosers at this point. And it sure sounds like you were hoping to get drafted, just not by the Patriots, even though the draft was winding down and you were running out of options. Can you imagine if a prospect of this year's NFL draft got chosen by the Minnesota Vikings, and they said, well, at least I'm not going to Ukraine? Can you imagine if a prospect of this year's NFL draft got chosen by the Seattle Seahawks and said, well, at least I'm not going to Gaza? You get the idea. There are certain things, especially after a team is giving you an opportunity, that you should not say. And this is right up there near the very top. Having the privilege to have a shot in the NFL versus having your freedom taken away from you to fight a war in a foreign country against your will and losing your life in the process. Especially seeing as you grew up in the era of the Vietnam War, where presumably you witnessed firsthand people coming back and serving with PTSD. I mean, come on. What are we doing here? What are we honestly doing here, Jimmy? And it won't come as a surprise to anyone that after getting drafted by the team behind me right here in the New England Patriots, Jimmy Jordan did not make it onto the roster. I know, shocking. He never ended up playing a down in the NFL. Now, apparently he did look halfway decent in training camp, and head coach Ron Earhart praised him on multiple occasions in the press, but it just didn't work out. He didn't make the team, and he never played a down in the National Football League. Although he did play for a bit in the United States Football League with the Tampa Bay Bandits. He wasn't that good with Tampa Bay, as in 1985, he threw 3 touchdowns and 11 interceptions. Not playing a down in the NFL is unfortunate, but it could be worse. At least you weren't born in North Korea. So as a word of advice to any players who get drafted, if you're not happy about the team that drafted you, don't compare it to war. Don't compare it to a literal military draft and fighting overseas. I can't believe I actually have to say that because it seems like common sense, almost like not bringing a toaster into a bathtub or not trying to operate a car while blindfolded. But apparently, it needs to be brought up. Don't compare getting drafted by the Patriots to Iran. Just don't do it. Not a smart idea. Not a good move. Would not recommend it. Because at the 1980 NFL draft, when it came to this man right here, Jimmy Jordan, the NFL draft and getting drafted by the Patriots was like war. Good for absolutely nothing. Get your official Jaguar Gear 9 merchandise by going to jj9shop.com and be sure to like and subscribe, as it really helps the channel out a lot. Join me every Wednesday night where we'll play NFL Trivia for cash prizes at 9 p.m. Eastern over on Twitch. To learn more about the history of college football, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 8. To learn more about the history of Major League Baseball, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 7. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for helping out the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. See how you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.